And we are live. Okay, so what's on my mind today is the introduction to my human-computer interaction and design classes that I often give. And I was talking to some students at office hours today, and that seemed like the message for my intro really resonated with them. So I'm gonna briefly give it here, even though I'm in the car waiting for some food delivery stuff. Okay, I'm just gonna switch to my laptop here. Okay. So what I do as an intro is I have the students kind of say, this is the world's worst presentation format just on my laptop in my car. I say, okay, think to yourself, not out loud. Okay, so do you personally identify as, an engineer, a hacker, a maker, a programmer? Do you have those words to describe yourself? Or do you describe yourself more as like an artist, a designer, a product manager, UX, user experience person? And just to give you some context, the makeup of my classes are usually split between people who come from more of a computer science background and people who come from a design or cognitive science or a more arts sort of background. So it's a mix of engineering and design and social sciences students. So we usually get a mix of people on both sides. And I kind of introduce myself very briefly, kind of my own background, which is I started off really on the left side here, the engineer, hacker, maker, programmer side. I was an ECS undergrad. I was my computer science. I was PhD in computer science. I worked as a software engineer at Google after graduating. I was an educational technology designer at a MOOC organization at X and also at MIT. As a postdoc, I was a computer science professor at the University of Rochester for 2 years, and now I'm a cognitive science professor at UC San Diego. So my career path has been going from that left side, the engineer, hacker, maker, programmer side, to the right side of more an art, design, product development, user experience. So I kind of went from the left side to the right side, and that was my own personal journey. So now I consider myself somewhere in the middle, right? That I kind of have strengths and interests in both sides. But I really started off on that kind of engineering, programming side. And I think this is the central picture that sticks with all my students who see this lecture in some of my classes. Here's what I think the market demand curve looks like. It looks like this U. So basically, if you're purely on this side, there is a, this y-axis doesn't just start at 0, right? It's actually more optimistic. There is a market demand, obviously, for pure engineers and programmers. And there is a market demand on this side for user experience, design, for product people, business people. But I think that as you go toward the middle, the demand just rises. Where when you're in that sweet spot in the middle, those people I think are in really high demand in the market nowadays. So these are people who can both do the engineering and hacking and understand design and product and user experience. So the idea here is that if you are a student coming in from the engineering side, I would hope that my classes help push you a little bit toward the middle, toward the design and UX side. And conversely, if you are more in the design, UX, product side, I would hope that learning some programming in these courses that I teach push you toward the left, toward a bit more the engineering side, with the hope that you're going to end up in the sweet spot in the middle here. And I kind of use my friend and MIT classmate, Carolyn, as an example. You can see her Twitter account, Carolyn Z, on Twitter. And she was an MIT undergraduate. I actually coincidentally knew her because she was one of the few MIT students from my high school. So I was, I think, the first person in my high school to go to MIT in recorded history in many, many years. I started in 2001. And then after me, I think there have only been 4, students from my high school, 4 or 5, very small handful who have gone to MIT. So I know all of them. So Carolyn was one of them. And she's doing really, really well in her career so far. So she was a computer science undergraduate. So she started on this engineer, hacker, maker, programmer side. And then she did a lot of design work as an undergraduate. She built up her portfolio. She did hobby projects. She did side projects. She did internships. She worked in student groups. She built up her design portfolio because the kind of MIT pure engineering programming education didn't really have a focus on that as much. So she really drove herself toward that right side. And she's been working at a very elite design firm for a while. And I kind of point to her and people like her as being in really high market demand, like people who have both a programming and engineering background and who have a strong sense of design and product and user experience. And by that, I don't mean that you need to be like an amazing artist, even though I think Carolyn is a really good artist and designer. But it doesn't just mean design doesn't just mean being able to sketch really good-looking drawings or diagrams. It really means understanding the design process, having empathy for users, understanding different stakeholders, and a lot of the more social side of product development and business. And that combined with engineering just gets you really, really far, in my view. So this is just about the course, about kind of advertising this introductory human-computer interaction design course that I teach as bringing both sides in the middle. So roughly half the students come from a computer science or engineering background, and I want to teach them design principles to carry them toward the middle. And roughly the other half come from social sciences, cognitive science, visual design, other sorts of majors, and I want to teach them some programming in this class to push them towards the middle. So that was I'm going to switch back to the camera. That was a very brief rundown on this, and I have I've had just conversations on and off with students who come up to me in office hours asking me about career advice and such, about what to do. And I just think that combination of this programming and coding skills and then design, product, user experience skills is so powerful. And it's for two reasons, right? So on one end, if you're purely doing programming, there are a lot of people who can do programming, especially around the world, as other countries now have compulsory and K-12 education in programming and computer science. That, I think, is getting more and more common. So you're going to compete with a lot of people who know how to code. On the other end, pure design or pure art or pure product management and user experience, there's actually not that many jobs in that. Because if you think about organizations, they don't actually have a demand to hire that many people on the pure design end. I mean, they may be valuable, the ones they do hire, they're really esteemed, but they need a lot more engineers and programmers than designers usually. I mean, I've heard of ratios like 5 to 1, 10 to 1, 10 engineers for every one product manager, 10 engineers for every one designer. It really varies by place. But I think the combination of that is really powerful.